So today I'd like to talk about, I think we could call it training the mind, or maybe even bringing relief to the mind, something like that. And it's based on a discourse in the Anguttara Nikaya, which I'm going to read to you. It's very short, 2 paragraphs. It's actually in the Book of Sixes, and it's called Coolness. I'm going to read Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's version, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other translations and the Pali, and it's going to feel for a few minutes like an actual academic course, maybe. But what I really want to focus on is how we use it in our daily life, or how we experience this. So here's the sutta. As I said, it's called Coolness. It's in the Book of Sixes, it's number 85. Bhikkhus, possessing 6 qualities, a bhikkhu is incapable of realizing the unsurpassed coolness. What 6? Here, a bhikkhu does not suppress the mind on an occasion when it should be suppressed. He does not exert the mind on an occasion when it should be exerted. He does not encourage the mind on an occasion when it should be encouraged. And he does not look at the mind with equanimity on an occasion when he should look at it with equanimity. He is of inferior disposition, and he takes delight in personal existence. Possessing these 6 qualities, a bhikkhu is incapable of realizing the unsurpassed coolness. Bhikkhus, possessing 6 qualities, a bhikkhu is capable of realizing the unsurpassed coolness. What 6? Here, a bhikkhu suppresses the mind on an occasion when it should be suppressed. He exerts the mind on an occasion when it should be exerted. He encourages the mind on an occasion when it should be encouraged. And he looks at the mind with equanimity on an occasion when one should look at it with equanimity. He's of superior disposition, and he takes delight in nibbana. Possessing these 6 qualities, a bhikkhu is capable of realizing the unsurpassed coolness. So you kind of get the idea. These 6 qualities, maybe these 6 orientations of the mind or efforts, either make it possible or impossible to realize the ultimate coolness, which is another way of talking about nibbana. And I'm going to share my screen. I made a little chart to show you. So this, can you see it? Anguttara Nikaya 685. And here across the top, just a minute, I have to move your pictures around a little bit so I can see better. Oh, and then it changed. Sorry. Touching the wrong thing. Okay, now I'm set. So on the left-hand column, I've got Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, and then the next one over is Venerable Bhikkhu Sujato's translation, and the third one is Venerable Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation. And then I've put in the Pali, not all of it, but enough to give us the keywords, and then a few notes from the commentary. So if we take a look at Bhikkhu Sujato's, or at that first part, the bhikkhus possessing 6 qualities, a bhikkhu is incapable of realizing the unsurpassed coolness, what 6? You can see in Venerable Sujato's translation, he degenderizes, maybe I can say. It calls, many of you know this already, he translates bhikkhus as mendicants to be inclusive of all the mendicants, not just the male ones, not just even maybe you could think not just even the fully ordained ones. And of course, when I read the suttas, when I was a layperson and still, I think of everyone. I mean, we all can use these things for practice and understanding the Dhamma. So mendicants, a mendicant with 6 qualities can realize supreme coolness. Venerable Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a monk endowed with 6 qualities, is incapable of realizing the unexcelled cooled stage, etc. So the important parts to compare, I think, are as we go through the 6 qualities. And where Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it suppressing the mind, the first one, Bhante Sujato calls it to keep the mind in check. And I like Venerable Thanissaro's version, which is to rein in the mind. You know, we can use the language, however, you know, it is, to helps us to really kind of get a handle on what is the Buddha talking about here. And the Pali, the word is niganhati, and the NA at the beginning means not. So you're not doing niganhati, not holding it back or restraining it. And I gave the second definition. These are all from the PTS, the Pali Text Society dictionary, to rebuke or censure. So you're not like watching the mind carefully and holding it back. I like that idea of holding it back or reining it in much better than suppressing. And so you can kind of, with more translations and with the definition of the Pali, you can kind of get more of a sense of what this is. Now the commentary, the few notes from the commentary I took from a footnote in Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. And the commentary is really focusing on meditation. So when the mind is to be suppressed by concentration on an occasion of restlessness. So that's the idea, you know, when the mind is restless, then you use your force of concentration to calm it down. I'm not even sure I can, well, I'm trying to think, do I have success with that or not? Is it a kind of suppressing the restlessness? Is that how it works? So as we look at this first one, do you have examples? Yes, Paula?
I do have a really good example because it happened last night. And I woke up at 3 o'clock and I had done some volunteering yesterday, and we'd also had a problem in the house that required a contractor, and I couldn't fall asleep, and I knew I was agitated, and I thought, well, Ayya always says to get up and meditate when you can't sleep. So I got up and I meditated, and I said, okay, well, if this meditation thing is going to work, the Buddha says, you know, try it out, right? And see if this path works. I said, if it's going to work, let's give it a try. And, you know, here's my chance to be a scientific observer. So I started meditating, and my mind kept going to the things that were bothering me. And I tried to restrain and say, okay, don't think about those things right now. You can get back to those later. And actually, that wasn't all that successful until I decided to do metta meditation to myself. That was wonderful. It worked. It really worked. And I woke up this morning, I went, you know, I meditated. I tried to keep my mind. I actually was using some chanting in my meditation, you know, loving kindness. And when I got up, I chanted things until I got into bed, and I kept chanting as I was trying to fall asleep. And I woke up and I actually told Phil, I said, you know what? This worked last night. I tried it and it worked. He can vouch for me. So I think that was like an exact example. And I'm amazed that you picked this topic to talk about, because I was going to ask you a little bit about it. But you know, I could be a workaholic, and my volunteering job has turned into that. And I need to somehow learn how to manage that. But this worked last night anyway.
Yeah, great example. And I see we might see a couple of the elements that we're going to look at in these 6 in what you experienced. The reining in, like, I mean, of course, you couldn't, you didn't need a whole lot of mindfulness to recognize how much suffering was happening with the mind being so agitated, but still you're observing it. And then you're, making a plan, basically using a technique and trying a couple of different things. And we might say that, you reined your mind in, but it didn't work to just try to like shift it away. Or I don't know how did you describe the first thing you tried, to like just trying to meditate and like tell the mind, don't worry about this right now. And
let's think about that later. And it was also had to do with the talk that I heard by Ajahn Brahmalia yesterday, who said that, with mindfulness, you can't like force it. You instead have to kind of work on your sila, and then it comes later. So I was recognizing that forcing not thinking about that, or forcing myself to be mindful about like trying to get rid of my thoughts, or maybe even concentrating my breathing at that moment wasn't doing it.
Yeah. Thank you, Paula. Anybody else got any thoughts on this one? I can't see you all because I'm screen, but if you can raise your hand or speak.
I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Patty.
Patty, I think it's down at the bottom of the screen where it says wherever your controls are, and then is it in React or something? Yeah.
Reactions?
Yeah. And then there's
something. Yay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. So while I was on retreat recently, my mind was wandering, as it does, and I tried to do the, it's like when a strong man holds a weak man down, right? That one. Okay. No, let's not do that. And then actually, I just went through the factors for awakening again and went, okay, effort needs to be applied. And I started reciting in my mind a couple of the suttas that are in our chant book, especially reflections on sharing aspirations. How's that? Sharing blessings and aspirations. Because there's the last part of that is so beautiful. I know, now darkness and delusion be dispelled. It's just, and it was a much more gentle way to approach that. It's interesting though. There's been a period for a while now that I just kind of let my mind wander. It's just kind of wandering, not anything specific, and then that particular occasion, which is still, it's still with me, which is nice, because I said, Patty, this is special. This is a precious time. Is this what you want to let your mind do? Is just kind of wander, benignly and ignorantly. And I went, no, that's not what I want. So it was a very loving and compassionate way to kind of support and restore my mind and my chitta, it was lovely.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you, Patty. That's great.
Thank you.
So I want us to consider, these are beautiful examples. They're very closely related, obviously, to meditation, which is where the commentary went to. But what about other times? let's say something's happened. I mean, obviously Paula was working with things that had happened that she was thinking about a lot, but maybe there are even some things that have a lot more strong, really strong emotions. Like maybe, have you ever been really overwhelmed with jealousy, for example, or, some kind of feeling really offended by someone? And then the mind keeps going over it and over it. Or the mind is looking for something basically that isn't healthy or wholesome. It doesn't, it's trying to seek out something sensational, maybe just to distract itself. And so there are all kinds of times when we want to rein the mind in so that it doesn't keep going over these thoughts that are bringing negative mental states and emotions to up and to be more prominent and to develop. So that's like you can really think about the different times when we should really rein it in. Really, it's like, no, I'm not going to continue to reflect on how rude this person was to me, or how mean they were, or something like that. Any other comments?
Wow, this is the other day I sent some, I'm a songwriter, and I sent some songs to a really good friend of mine, and they're new works, and I'm very kind of insecure about it. And he just wrote back, "Oh, these aren't your best."
Ooh.
And I have been so angry. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to even talk about it because it feels like I shouldn't react this way, that I should have a thicker skin, but I feel, sitting with it, and I just keep going back to and I realize I'm sort of enjoying the drama of it. I'm enjoying here's what I could say. And I'm never talking to him again. And I feel like I think there's part of me who doesn't want to let it go. And really letting it go means sort of going into this place what's unknown to me, that I will be taken care of. Like, I think part of me wants justice. And I remember on the retreat we were on recently, where someone asked you, is anger ever wholesome? And I don't think I've ever seen you really with quite that expression that you had, where you were just, you didn't pause, you didn't think about it, you just said no. And then you went on to say how anger can feel like it can be very productive. And yet there's a wiser way to go. But there's that step between being angry and wanting to go there and saying, oh, no. And I know that I'm trapped, and I know the way out, but I just don't want to take it.
Yeah.
And anyhow, so I really appreciate us talking about this a lot.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in this collection of 6 things, we're going to find one that even really addresses your example. And I will see which one you recognize as such, if that works. So let's thank you, Denny. The one thing that strikes me about enjoying the drama, I think this is true. I think this is one of the things that keeps us coming back to lifetime after lifetime. we don't really want the movie to end. We want to keep having another episode of drama. It seems better than not having anything going on. Thank you, Denny.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Karen?
Yeah, I did have this one experience. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, but I'll share it because everybody's so nice here. You know, I went to a retreat and I had one of those Vipassana romances they warn you about, where you get really attracted to somebody. And I didn't even know who the guy was. I hadn't even talked to him. And yeah, these feelings started to arise, and I was quite appalled at myself. I was like, you know, I don't even know this guy. But luckily, somebody had told me about the Vipassana romance, so I recognized what was going on. So all these thoughts and fantasies and dreams kept arising, and I kept trying to, you know, suppress them. I was trying so many different techniques. And this lasted for like 3 days. It was such a torture. And then finally, when it left, you could feel it leaving. You could feel the obsession moving through and out. Because, you know, at a retreat, you're a little bit more concentrated and you can have a little bit of distance from your thoughts. So it was a really interesting experience to see all these thoughts I didn't want to have, but they kept coming over and over again. And yeah, it just really made me see how these, you know, these thoughts aren't mine. I didn't want them. Didn't want to be attracted to this guy. I had no interest really, but it just kept happening. And yeah, I don't know, like I just tried all the techniques I could think of. And then finally after 3 days, but it was a real lesson in how you don't own those thoughts, and that, you know, this is why this is so challenging, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't have anything more to say other than that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Karen. There's a story from the Vinaya that maybe I'll tell later that's related, but it's certainly the case that this just kind of comes on you. It might even, you know, feel like, oh, I just came down with a cold, you know. I mean, it's just like it has to run its course a bit. As long as we're mindful and present, and we're not buying into it, and we're not feeding it, you know, that's part of this restraint, reining in the mind. And you can't stop the thoughts from coming up, but you can stop it right there where you don't want to get in and start believing them. Maybe I'll tell the story now instead of this cliffhanger business. It's in the Therigatha. This monk talks about how he was on alms round and he had to walk past the charnel ground. And I don't know if I've told you this one before. It's a little shocking, so brace yourself. But he's walking past the charnel ground and he sees this half-rotten body of a woman, and lust arises. And he is so freaked out and disgusted by having lust arise, seeing a half decomposing body of a woman, that he got enlightened. It pushed him over the edge and he totally let go. So yeah, it's interesting how the mind can work and how it can be directed based on the conditioning, the new conditioning that we're giving it. Joyce?
I've been working on my habit of having distracted thinking. It really can be very profound. And I'm focusing on the Majjhima Nikaya number 20 about distracted thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a number 2 strategy there, where I tend to focus on what is the gratification of particular thinking. often it comes down to like really enhancing the sense of self. There's other things going on as well. And also the next step is to look at the danger, and some people have been mentioning that within telling their stories, but we're not being mindful at that moment. We're not concentrated. We're not using our precious time to like enhance our practice.
Mm.
So I'm still working on that, but I'm just finding that particular teaching just really, really, really deep, and useful. So that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Thank you, Joyce. And Paula?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Joyce for that comment because it reminded me of part of my meditation reflection last night was that I realized at a certain point that one of the reasons why I was so upset was because I was having too many feelings about the self in regards to what had happened on that day.
Mhm.
And when I realized that and tried to let go of that, just as an aspect, because I know I can't get rid of selfing completely, but just said, well, what if you didn't attach to that aspect that this happened and it was your fault, but that, this is just your selfing here. It gave me some freedom. So I really like what Joyce said. Thank you, Joyce. It reminded me of that.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Okay, so the second one is that they don't exert their mind when they should. So this is pretty straightforward, like not putting the energy in to exert the mind. It's translated pretty much the same way in all cases. And the word itself, paganhati, is to put to, exert, strain, apply vigorously, and it's related to the mind. So putting in energy, says the commentary, when the mind has fallen into sluggishness. And, I think some of the examples have really been about exerting the mind, turning it, like working at how do I address this? How do I work with it? Finding ways to do it. So the exertion is definitely there. And then the third one is about encouraging the mind. So of course, we're on the negative side of things here, not encouraging the mind when we should. And then Venerable Tenisaro's translation doesn't gladden the mind when it should be gladdened. So it gives a little bit of a different sense of how we encourage the mind. And so we saw a few examples already, taking a piece of the chanting and really helping that lift up the heart, helping that bring a completely different, really changing the set, right? Changing the whole feeling, the whole mood of the mind. And so bringing gladness and delight is what we see in the dictionary. So obviously in this case, it's not doing that. It's not the same word as we see in Anapanasati Sutta when the Buddha says gladden the mind. It's a different word, but we definitely get this sense of how do we encourage. And so a number of these examples have been really excellent with that. The fourth one is not looking at the mind with equanimity. So the word here is ajupeka. Ajupekati is the verb. And it's like there's upeka in there, which is the equanimity bit. But we don't really see that in the definition. If you look over at the Pali definition, there's it to look on intently or with care, to oversee, to take care of. So when we watch over the mind, so again, Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation, he doesn't watch over his mind when he should. And so whether or not the equanimity part quite belongs. I mean, we can like use that as a way of maybe seeing that there are times when our watching over the mind has this balanced quality to it. The part that's watching is balanced. That helps bring the mind and the thoughts it's entertaining, the way that it's moving, you might say. Maybe there's a more of a balance that comes from that kind of the wisdom aspect of the mind is seeing with balance. The commentary is saying it should be, the mind should be looked at with equanimity and like the equanimity enlightenment factor. So I really don't see that implied here. But you know, it's kind of like when we look at these translations and so on, we start to get the sense of, you know, like the range of what we might apply here. So when do you think, and of course, any of these other ones we just looked at, exerting the mind, encouraging the mind, looking, like really paying attention to the mind and watching it with a kind of even temperedness or carefulness. Is there anything that comes to your mind right now about how to use these? Yeah, Carrie?
Yeah, maybe this goes a little bit to the question that I have. There are times when thinking about the Dharma is a way to help me a little bit detach from the urgency of what's going on. And right now, one of the things I'm thinking about is something that might help for Denny, which is I was reading in something, I guess it's the parable of the, or I don't know if it's from the Dharma or not, the way that hunters hunt monkeys, that they'll carve out a coconut and drain the liquid and cut some of the meat and put it in the bottom of the coconut. And the monkey will put their hand in to grab the meat. And when the hunter comes, the monkey won't let go of the meat. And so the hand can't come out of the coconut. And so they're captured because I have a tendency to that kind of greediness. It's about greediness. And like it happened yesterday when I was in a situation that was unpleasant that I should have just let go of. And I was watching, oh, you know, I'm really holding on here. Probably shouldn't be holding on right now, but I'm attached to being holding on, kind of like Denny. So in the middle of the night, while Paula got up to meditate, I lie in bed sometimes and I think about the Dharma. So that was one thing that I began to think about in terms of my own practice. And doing that, I think there's a certain equanimity in being able to step back and look at that. So maybe I'm wrong about that. And the other thing that I was thinking about in the middle of the night was I'm here with a community of people who are, you know, pretty frail, basically. And I was thinking about somebody whose shoulder is bothering her and how I wanted to offer help, and realizing, like, then I started to think, well, why am I talking? You know, why am I offering help? It's really a selfing of me, a sense of myself as like being a good and helpful person, as opposed to when I impulsively will just reach out and help someone when help is needed. So those are the things that I think about in the middle of the night. And so that was my question, is like, does this count as practice when, you know, I do have a little bit of distance and can look back and I'm thinking about it through the prism of the Dharma. So, and I don't know if that counts as using equanimity, but I think it does.
I think it does.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it does count. Well, first of all, I definitely know that it counts as practice to be reflecting on the Dhamma. And sometimes you've heard me say giving ourselves Dhamma talks, you know, it's like, it really does. It does help it does encourage the mind when we're encouraging it, when it needs to be encouraged, and we're helping to rein it in some ways, and really watching the mind. It's not like all these things are discrete, separate approaches. It's like these are the tools that we can use, and reflecting on the Dhamma is right in the sequence of the things that the Buddha said we have to do in order to really get it at a deep level, for that insight to arise, and thinking about the Dhamma, seeing how it applies, noticing what we're actually doing, what the mind's really up to. It's really, and repeatedly people have brought up the sense of self, which we're going to see coming up here in a second. When we're really invested in our own body and mind, and we're really kind of coming from a place of self. First of all, there's suffering, and we can really, I think, always check back when we're suffering and see there's some kind of attachment to self here. There's some kind of self-interest. And so, yes, indeed, another, really important practice is to reflect on the Dhamma and talk to ourselves about it, maybe talk to a friend about it, about the Dhamma and the application of Dhamma. It's great. Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Ron?
As I was listening to the different experiences that have been shared today, a thought came up for me that it's causes and conditions and dependent co-arising or dependent origination, which is something that I try to use during the day to either stop what's coming up from coming up or doing something about it after it has come up. So if there's a contact, if somebody talks to me, and then there's feeling, it's pleasant or unpleasant. And when it's unpleasant, well, I might try to do something to get rid of it. But on the other hand, reflecting on that, oh, here's something I don't like. And if I continue, independent origination goes from feeling to craving, tanha, and then from tanha to upadana, clinging, grasping, and then on to becoming, birth, and sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, and then death. So to me, I'm doing another, I call it a cycle. I've heard others call it a cycle. It's a process that starts with ignorance and runs its course, and it does it very quickly. And so another reason why I do my best to be mindful throughout the day, because once this starts, if I'm mindless, I'll just do another cycle and I'll be born again. That's how I look at it. The self is born again.
Yeah.
So I could do this several times during the day. So I'm attempting to be as mindful as I can be in order to catch it before it's already on its way. And as Ajahn Amaro describes it, the train has left the station.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's beautiful the way that Buddha gives so many different models of how to see the Dhamma. And so, as you're saying, it's like the dominoes are falling in that chain of dependent origination, and you can't stop it until it kind of gets to the point where you're feeling the feeling, and then you can do some pretty good work in putting a wedge of awareness right there and not taking action on that. So reducing the craving to be free from suffering. It's not, we all have it. we all want relief. But if we're not mindful and haven't developed skills, as this side of it is saying, we're not watching the mind, we're not, exerting the mind and encouraging it in the right direction. If that's the case, then we're going to just be overwhelmed with that craving and clinging. And, like you said, you go for another round. But then we're going to see the opposite. We won't really have to look at it very carefully, but when you're stopping yourself there, it's like, okay, this is feeling. Sometimes you can say, this is just feeling. It's going to pass. It's impermanent. And then I don't have to get on board with the craving for it to end, or the whole sort of mental proliferation around how to respond, or how, knowing what you want to do that's skillful is important about the situation you're in. But, as we know, that's not usually the way the mind reacts, or our old patterns may not be so skillful. So that's great. That's another really good example of how we address this.
So I just one quick comment about upadana, clinging.
Mm-hmm.
That word also means fuel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I'm fueling it with anger or what have you, anxiety, doesn't make any difference. If I'm fueling it, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to stay.
Yeah.
It's going to stay. If I can stop the fueling it, then I can stop at that point and not continue on
Yes,
to another birth of the self.
that's right. And that simile I bring up often about the Buddha talking about 4 loads of wood burning this bonfire, and are you going to keep throwing dry grass and sticks on it or not? And this sutta is giving us a similar kind of idea. So when you're at that point, Ron, I'm sure that there is some reining in the mind. There's probably some exertion to bring the mind into a wholesome state. There's encouragement probably of the mind. One of the examples of the Buddha encouraging himself was when he was still unenlightened and he was experiencing fear. And of course, he talked about this after he was enlightened, to say, back then, when I would feel afraid, the way I practiced with it was to continue to walk if I was walking, or sit if I was sitting. But he did another thing. He encouraged his mind by telling himself about his good qualities, reminding himself of his good, wholesome qualities. And so there's all these all kind of work together. And that's right, Ron. That's so true. This is an important part of it. So now we go on to these last 2, which are a little bit different. He is of inferior disposition. That's Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Or Bhante Sujatos, they have bad convictions. Or Tanisaro Bhikkhu, he's intent on what is lowly. So it's kind of interesting. It's like the word here is hina adimutika. Looks like 8s, but they're S's, I think. There's something weird going on in the mutika. Maybe that's just, I think there's something else got in there. Adimutika. So it means the hina, like, when they talk about Theravada as hinayana, inferior, low, poor, miserable. Those are the Mahayana people saying that. The Theravadan people don't call it that.
That's right.
Yeah. It's much better to, like Master Wa was Mahayana monk, but he talked about the northern school and the southern school instead of using
Yeah.
these terms. So inferior, low, poor, miserable, vile, base, abject, contemptible, despicable. That's all in the kinds of that's the kind of direction this person is going, and he's inclining in this direction, or attached to this, or bent on this. So that's going to really keep us from relieving the mind. This makes more problems, not going in the right direction, not inclining in the right way. And the last one, taking delight in personal existence. So here, this comes back to that misconception of self every time. What am I delighting in? Am I delighting in having this feeling of being me, and this is mine, and this is such a incredibly potent source of suffering. So what's the flip side? Of course, we're going to rein the mind in. The words over here just don't have the na in front of them. So it's actually doing it, exerting it at the right time, encouraging it at the right time, watching over it, taking care of it. I like the definition: to look on intently and with care, to oversee, to take care of. Do you have an example in your life of taking care of something or someone very carefully? Can we do that with the mind? It has this kind of loving sort of tenor to it, I feel. And then if it's with equanimity, yeah, it's a balanced mind, but it's not the indifferent. So that this other definition there is to look on indifferently. The sort of worldly or mundane way of using upekkha, which it does get used this way sometimes by the Buddha, is that it's indifference, but that's not the Brahmavihara quality. That's not the enlightenment quality. It's not about indifference. It's about even-mindedness, stability, calm, seeing things as they are, but holding them, in a balanced way. So I feel like, if you think about watching over someone, a child, a pet, whatever, however that's happened in your own life, can we do that with our mind? Can we care for it? Take care of it? Often we kind of want to beat it up. We beat ourselves up, but it doesn't really help. It doesn't bring that relief. When we take care, there's a kindness there. I think that does help. And then having this superior, or superior and inferior really are not so easy for me to relate to, or I don't find that so helpful. But this idea, the word in Pali is pandita. So pandita nutika, circumspect, intelligent. So that's what you're inclining to. That's what you're attached to. That's what you're bent on. You have excellent convictions. You have this morally upright, inclining towards nibbana. We have the discussion once in a while briefly about the word inclining kind of means you're going down the slope like the river to the ocean, but I think you're going up to nibbana. So maybe it's not the perfect word, but it gives us the sense of it being natural to move in that direction. Our Venerable Tenisaro's translation here, intend on what is exquisite. So that way of leaning, or being committed. And then the sixth one, taking delight in Nibbana. So Bhante Sudaso always translates it as, or Bhante Sujato translating it as extinguishment. I like it better untranslated, like Bhikkhu Bodhi did. And I'm not as inspired by unbinding either, but to really just start to get the sense of what Nibbana is. And I didn't put the half page or page of the PTS dictionary in here to describe Nibbana, but we're all getting that sense. So that complete letting go and highest happiness, peace, and freedom from all defilements. So taking delight in that, and taking delight, how does this work on a practical day-to-day level? I say taking delight in the peacefulness that arises when we do let go. And even if the mind was inclined to want some drama, or to want to feel powerful in its identity, then when we let go, there's actually a much more exquisite experience, feeling that relief. So, of course, possessing these six qualities, one is able to realize supreme coolness. Any other comments or questions or examples? Yeah, Cynthia?
Yeah, I have a question here, but I'm not sure if I can formulate it. It seems, I seem to be able to, if the mind's just like running off and telling stories and I seem to be able to rein that in somewhat and set it aside. And, that's not what's happening now, especially if I'm recognizing that it's like the same story that's happened 50 times. But it's harder with strong emotions, especially if there's anxiety or fear around, which is a lot of what I've been experiencing the last, excuse, that's my bird clock. It'll shut up in a minute. Like, because there's that sense of, is there something I need to do? Is there something I need to pay attention to? Is there something I need to take care of? Or is this just all random, fear running amok? I mean, sometimes I can, like this morning, I was trying to sit and all the anxiety and fear started to come up. And it's like, that's not what's happening right now. Just here, just now, just this, just focus on the breath. But like trying to trust somehow, how to trust somehow that I have the sense of when it is time to pay attention to something and when it's not. I guess that's the question, how to recognize when I'm just running amok and it's to no purpose aside for increasing anxiety, and when like, okay, I need to do something about this.
Yeah. So first, and you did touch on this, but first separating the feeling from the thoughts about the feeling. So it's important to make that distinction. And because it's the thoughts that keep us bound up and that increase our negative mental states and increase the feelings. So recognizing that the thoughts, we can use some of these techniques and the methods people have been talking about this morning and others to turn our mind away from the thoughts. But the feeling, when there's that feeling, we want to look at it in the body. And again, as much as possible, detached. You know, to really, you know, if, you know, we haven't maybe, how to say this, we haven't realized full extinguishment yet, a full, you know, realization of Nibbana, but we can do what we can to behave like, you know, to recognize that where I'm headed in this practice is detachment from these feelings. So whatever we can do to step back and observe, and that observer, that part of the chitta, that's going to keep going after the body falls away. So we really want to strengthen that. I mean, you know, we want, what we want to have keep going is that strength and that clarity. So the more we exercise that, that's what's going to take the center stage. And the other habits of thinking become less and less powerful. So this question of when to know when I should do something, this is a very practical and important question. You know, it's like, when do I just kind of turn away? And, you know, just for a lot of us, maybe we try to use distraction, and that's not encouraged. And it's like, we don't want to just distract ourselves, because then we're not working with the feeling in the body. We're not working with the underlying cause. So everybody's been giving wonderful examples of, you know, really doing the practice with our mental states and with our feelings. And so we know we don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we want to do is be present with those feelings with some kindness, and then restrain the thoughts or replace the thoughts, or understand, you know, what the attachment is that underlies the thought patterns. And then there's the practical reality that sometimes we have to take action. But knowing when comes from wisdom. And the wisdom is there if we give the mind the space.
Mm.
So doing the kinds of things that people have been talking about to bring peace to the mind as much as possible, or at least some distance from the issue at hand. Because that space, that's what allows the deeper understanding of what we should do arise. It comes more out of our intuition or our deeper reaches of the mind than it comes from the thinking mind, just like insight. So practicing touching into that deeper intuition, that depth of the mind. And even having the intention to do that helps. You know, like we really turn inwards and get quiet and see what arises. And in that process, we want to soothe and calm and bring relief to the feelings. And it doesn't work at all to suppress those. It's the thoughts that fuel them that we have to suppress or turn away from or restrain or guard.
Thank you. Yeah. One thing that's helped some is remembering something I heard James Barrows say, which is the awareness is fear. The awareness of fear is not afraid. You know, at least recognizing that there was some part of the mind that could see it happening and
That's right.
step back in that a little bit. So that's been helpful. But thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Cynthia. Those are the same kinds of things Ajahn Sumedho would say, you know, someone comes to him and says, everything looks dark, everything's black. He says, is the one who's seeing the dark, dark? You know, there is that vantage point from which we see that isn't wrapped up in what it is we're watching. Yeah, thank you. Ron?
It's difficult for me to do at times when I'm experiencing something and it's unpleasant or very unpleasant. And I've learned, like, from Ajahn of Longpor Sumedho, that this is an opportunity to reflect, to investigate, to understand, which is the second noble truth, right? It's to be understood. So how can I understand it if I don't reflect on it, if I don't investigate? What are the causes and conditions that has caused this experience to come about? To me, that's really key. That's what I'm trying to do more of. I'm still, processing, learning about that, but it's not easy to take something that's so bad, so ugly that's happening, and stop and then reflect on it. And here again, that's mindfulness. I really believe that mindfulness training, is very important. So this can be done during every day I wake up.
That's right. Yes, and it's difficult, and it's very difficult because we've experienced trauma in the past. There are reactions that have already been built into our system. We have to be able to put a stopgap right there to be able to really put the brakes on that part. So let me clarify that. There are times when the reaction is so strong, we need to get a handle on it wherever we can. Let's try to at least stop saying things. Like sometimes the mind can be in a state where we can have enough mindfulness to know that right now we shouldn't speak. Not until we've gotten this, the words that come to my mind are under control, but I don't really like the stiffness of that. It's like when I've gotten sort of the right amount of insulation around that feeling, enough padding, enough free space, enough something to, then I can talk when the mind is more balanced. But before that, if we know we're in that kind of state, we're having that reaction, to catching it as soon as we can, and just kind of just coming back to ourselves, being present with our feelings, and not worry at all about what's happening on the outside, unless there's some physical danger. Get away. But it's like we don't want to let that run the course of making more calm. So, but there are reasons why these patterns are there, and there are reasons why these reactions happening. And I've said many times, if we really knew where this stream of consciousness has been, we'd be completely understanding and sympathetic towards ourselves. So that's one part of it. And then it's like you said, Ron, the first noble truth, we have to understand the suffering. So we turn towards it and we really look at it. And second noble truth, we unpack it, we discover, where the clinging is, where the misunderstanding is around, thinking this is me and mine. And when we can do that, then we do start feeling that relief. Third noble truth. the cessation of the suffering. So repeating that pattern over and over and over again helps us to condition. We put in a new set of patterns. We've got a new automatic unfolding, and we still want to observe it. But when you start to see the practice taking hold like that, and as many of the things that people have been talking about, it's your practice taking hold. You know, being becoming the primary of response. So it's excellent. I think we should meditate for a few minutes and just let this all kind of sink in. I have so much appreciation for everyone's practice. I mean, you're all really changing those patterns and changing the direction of your life to being more free, more happy, more contented, more resilient. And more kind, more compassionate to everyone. So we sit down or lie down or walk or stand and turn our mind inwards, and then we look at what's there. Being willing to accept the current reality for what it is. Maybe we'd like our mind to be in a certain way, but it's not that way. It's experiencing this. And it's okay, whatever it is. And if we notice something there that's unwholesome, you might say, or limiting, because the other way, the loving, compassionate, kind, joyful, quantumous mind, that's unlimited. But the anger, the jealousy, the resentment, the selfing, that's limited. It holds us in place, holds us back, keeps the dukkha going. So the first step is just to be aware of what's really there, not to ever try to cover things up. Knowing the state of the mind, knowing the feeling. And allowing it to be, but that doesn't mean we just observe things coming, going. No, we're proactive too. We're aware, and we bring the remedies that help. And if the mind is running wild, we want to help it become calm and restrained. And if the mind is depressed, sluggish, and we want to encourage it, remind it of goodness, remind it of selflessness. Reminded of joy, that in this world there is the dark and the light. And we calm what's associated with the dark and reject it, turn it away, and embrace what's associated with the light, the wholesome, the uplifting, the generous. You take delight in the progress, delight in the goodness, and not waste any time or lose any ground by beating ourselves up for anything. Just acknowledging, forgiving, and learning, and inclining towards Nibbana. Well, it's nice to see all of you who joined us later after our check-in. And it's been such a nice time to meet with you this morning. Anybody have any last thoughts?
Ayya, when are you going to be on retreat?
Oh, yeah, thank you for asking. It starts on the 16th, so we'll have one more Saturday. And also on that day, East Bay Dhamma. Talking about the 5 powers and faculties.
And you'll be back when?
The retreat ends on the 19th of December.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Cynthia.
You will be missed.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're really looking forward to it, I have to say. And I'm
Yes.
going to be staying in the new kuti, which is really kind of exciting because I've been staying here in the main house with people coming and going, you know, kind of all the time. So
Yeah,
it'll be
wonderful.
a nice thing. And maybe, I don't know, there's progress on the visa application for Anagarikasarana. It's not finished yet, but they've done their interview with us. So if they believe we're the real thing, then it'll go forward in a good way. And then the plan is when she comes, she'll be staying in the kuti I'm going to use for the retreat. So we're really, really grateful to be able to, you know, we're building the next kuti, and when that's finished, we'll have a kuti for each of the nuns. So that'll be nice.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, see you next week.
All right. Thank you, Patty. Good luck getting settled.
It'll be a couple weeks yet, but I'll be settled when you come back.
Right.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.